Selections from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, the teacher of spirituality. Section 2. The preaching of sermons by Brooks and Stones may be true as a poetical figure, but no one can preach a single grain of truth until he has it in himself. To whom do the Brooks preach sermons? To that human soul only, whose lotus of life has already opened. When the heart has been opened, it can receive teaching from the Brooks or the Stones. It can get some religious teaching from all these. But the unopened heart will see nothing but Brooks and rolling stones. A blind man may come to a museum, but he comes and goes only. If he is to see, his eyes must first be opened. This eye opener of religion is the teacher. With the teacher, therefore, our relationship is that of ancestor and descendant. The teacher is the spiritual ancestor and the disciple is the spiritual descendant. It is all very well to talk of liberty and independence, but without humility, submission, veneration, and faith, there will not be any religion. It is a significant fact that where this relation still exists between the teacher and the taught, there alone gigantic spiritual souls grow. But in those who have thrown it off, religion is made into a diversion. In nations and churches where this relation between teacher and taught is not maintained, spirituality is almost an unknown quantity. It never comes without that feeling. There is no one to transmit and no one to be transmitted to, because they are all independent. Of whom can they learn? And if they come to learn, they come to buy learning. Give me $1 worth of religion. Cannot I pay $1 for it? Religion cannot be got that way. There is nothing higher and holier than the knowledge which comes to the soul transmitted by a spiritual teacher. If a man has become a perfect yogi, it comes by itself, but it cannot be got in books. You may go and knock your head against the four corners of the world, seek in the Himalayas, the Alps, the Caucasus, and desert of Gobi and Sahara, or the bottom of the sea, but it will not come until you find a teacher. Find the teacher, serve him as a child, open your heart to his influence, see in him God manifested. Our attention should be fixed on the teacher as the highest manifestation of God. And as the power of attention concentrates there, the picture of the teacher as man will melt away, the frame will vanish, and the real God will be left there. Those that come to truth with such a spirit of veneration and love, for them the Lord of truth speaks the most wonderful words. Take thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest in holy ground. Wherever his name is spoken, that place is holy. How much more so is a man who speaks his name, and with what veneration ought we to approach a man out of whom come spiritual truths. This is the spirit in which we are to be taught. Such teachers are few in number, no doubt, in this world, but the world is never altogether without them. The moment it is absolutely bereft of these, it will cease to be. It will become a hideous hell and will just drop. These teachers are the fair flowers of human life and keep the world going. It is the strength that is manifested from these hearts of life that keeps the bonds of society intact. Beyond these is another set of teachers, the Christ of the world. These teachers of all teachers represent God Himself in the form of man. They are much higher. They can transmit spirituality with a touch, with a wish, which makes even the lowest and most degraded characters saints in 1 second. Do you not read how they used to do these things? They are not the teachers about whom I was speaking. They are the teachers of all teachers, the greatest manifestations of God to man. We cannot see God except through them. We cannot help worshipping them, and they are the only beings we are bound to worship. No man hath seen God, but as he is manifested in the Son. We cannot see God. If we try to see him, we make a hideous caricature of God. There is an Indian story that an ignorant man was asked to make an image of the god Shiva, and after days of struggle, he made an image of a monkey. So, whenever we attempt to make an image of God, we make a caricature of Him because we cannot understand Him as anything higher than man, as long as we are men. The time will come when we transcend our human nature and know Him as He is. But so long as we are men, we must worship Him in man. Talk as we may, try as we may, we cannot see God except as a man. We may deliver great intellectual speeches, become very great rationalists, and prove that these tales of God are all nonsense. But let us come to practical common sense. What is behind this remarkable intellect? Zero, nothing, simply so much froth. When next you hear a man delivering great intellectual lectures against this worship of God, get hold of him and ask him what is his idea of God, what he means by omnipotence and omniscience and omnipresent love, and so forth, beyond the spelling of the words. He means nothing. He cannot formulate an idea. He is no better than the man in the street who has not read a single book. That man in the street, however, is quiet and does not disturb the world, while the other man's arguments cause disturbance. He has no actual perception, and both are on the same plane. Religion is realization, and you must make the sharpest distinction between talk and realization. What you perceive is your soul realization. Man has no idea of the spirit. He has to think of it with the forms he has before him. He has to think of the blue skies or the expansive fields or the sea or something huge. How else can you think of God? So, what are you doing in reality? You are talking of omnipresence and thinking of the sea. Is God the sea? A little more common sense is required. Nothing is so uncommon as common sense. The world is too full of talk. A truce to all these frothy arguments of the world. We are by our present constitution limited and bound to see God as man. If the buffaloes want to worship God, they will see him as a huge buffalo. If a fish wants to worship God, it will have to think of him as a big fish. You and I, the buffalo, the fish, each represent so many different vessels. All these go to the sea to be filled with water according to the shape of each vessel. In each of these vessels is nothing but water. So with God. When men see him, they see him as man, and the animals as animal, each according to his ideal. That is the only way you can see him. You have to worship him as man, because there is no other way out of it. Two classes of men do not worship God as man: the human brute who has no religion, and the Paramahamsa, the highest yogi who has gone beyond humanity, who has thrown off his mind and body and gone beyond the limits of nature. All nature has become his self. He has neither mind nor body and can worship God as can a Jesus or a Buddha. They did not worship God as man. The other extreme is the human brute. You know how two extremes look alike. Similar is the case with the extreme of ignorance and the other extreme of knowledge. Neither of these worships anybody. The extremely ignorant do not worship God, not being developed enough to feel the need for so doing. Those that has attained the highest knowledge also do not worship God, having realized and become one with God. God never worships God. Between these two poles of existence, if anyone tells you he is not going to worship God as man, take care of him. He is an irresponsible talker. He is mistaken. His religion is for frothy thinkers. It is intellectual nonsense. Therefore, it is absolutely necessary to worship God as man, and blessed are those races which have such a God man to worship. Christians have such a God man in Christ. Therefore, cling close to Christ. Never give up Christ. That is the natural way to see God. See God in man. All our ideas of God are concentrated there. The great limitation Christians have is that they do not heed other manifestations of God besides Christ. He was a manifestation of God, so was Buddha, so were some others, and there will be hundreds of others. Do not limit God anywhere. Pay all the reverence that you think is due to God, to Christ. That is the only worship we can have. God cannot be worshipped. He is the immanent being of the universe. It is only to His manifestation as man that we can pray. It would be a very good plan when Christians pray to say, "In the name of Christ." It would be wise to stop praying to God and only pray to Christ. God understands human failings and becomes a man to do good to humanity. Whenever virtue subsides and immorality prevails, then I come to help mankind, says Krishna. He also says, "Fools, not knowing that I, the omnipotent and omnipresent God of the universe, have taken this human form, deride me, and think that cannot be." Their minds have been clouded with demoniacal ignorance, so they cannot see in Him the Lord of the universe. These great incarnations of God are to be worshipped. Not only so, they alone can be worshipped on the days of their birth and on the days when they went out of this world. We ought to pay more particular reverence to them. In worshipping Christ, I would rather worship Him just as He desires on the day of His birth. I would rather worship Him by fasting than by feasting, that is, by praying. When these are thought of, these great ones, they manifest themselves in our souls and they make us like unto them. Our whole nature changes and we become like them. But you must not mix up Christ or Buddha with hobgoblins flying through the air and all that sort of nonsense. Sacrilege. Christ coming into a spiritualistic sense to dance. I have seen that pretense in this country. It is not in that way that these manifestations of God come. The very touch of one of them will be manifest upon a man. When Christ touches, the whole soul of man will change. That man will be transfigured just as he was. His whole life will be spiritualized. From every pore of his body, spiritual power will emanate. What were the great powers of Christ in miracles and healing in one of his character? They were low, vulgar things that he could not help doing because he was among vulgar beings. Where was this miracle making done? Among the Jews, and the Jews did not take him. Where was it not done? In Europe. The miracle making went to the Jews who rejected Christ, and the Sermon on the Mount to Europe which accepted him. The human spirit took on what was true and rejected what was spurious. The great strength of Christ is not in his miracles or his healing. Any fool could do those things. Fools can heal others, devils can heal others. I have seen horrible demoniacal men do wonderful miracles. They seem to manufacture fruits out of the earth. I have known fools and diabolical men tell the past, present, and future. I have seen fools heal at a glance by the will the most horrible diseases. These are powers truly, but often demoniacal powers. The other is the spiritual power of Christ, which will live and always has lived, an almighty, gigantic love, and the words of truth which he preached. The action of healing men at a glance is forgotten, but his saying, "Blessed are the pure in heart," that lives today. These words are a gigantic magazine of power, inexhaustible so long as the human mind lasts. So long as the name of God is not forgotten, these words will roll on and on never cease to be. These are the powers Jesus taught and the powers he had. The power of purity, it is a definite power. So, in worshipping Christ, in praying to Him, we must always remember what we are seeking. Not those foolish things of miraculous display, but the wonderful powers of the Spirit, which makes man free, gives him control over the whole nature of man, takes from him the badge of slavery, and shows God unto him.